We are now working in Module 1, Lesson 11, and our objective is to multiply a decimal fraction by single-digit whole numbers. And we can begin multiplying our decimal fractions by our single-digit whole numbers using a place value chart. And so if you look at our place value chart here, we can see that this is our ones place, this is our tenths place, and this is our hundredths place. And it's not necessary to go ahead and label the entire thing. We'll stick with our ones, our tenths, and our hundredths place. And so I see that I have 3/10. So I'm going to go ahead and mark or draw 3 discs in my tens place to represent my 3/10. Now, this is telling me that I have 4 times 3/10, or it's telling me that I have 4 copies of 3/10. And so here I have one group or one copy. I'm going to make 3 more copies so that I have 4 copies total. Okay. And so now I have my 4 copies or my 4 groups of 3/10. Now I'm going to see what my total number of tenths is that I have here. And so if I count them, I can see that I have 3, 6, 9, 12 tenths. Now, I recall that if I have 10 tenths, I can bundle them and make them a 1. So I am going to go ahead and bundle 10 of my tenths, and I'm going to indicate that I'm moving them over here. And so now I have 1, 1, because 10 tenths is equal to 1, 1. And so if I look at my place value chart, now I can see that I have 1, 1. I have my decimal point, and what I have remaining in my tenths place that has not been bundled is 2 tenths. So my answer when I multiply 4 times 3/10, my product is 1 and 2 tenths. We'll go ahead and try this again with a number that's a little bit larger. So I'll begin by, again, labeling my place value chart, and here's my ones place, my tenths place, my hundredths place, and this time I see that I have a digit that is in my thousands place, so I will label that as well. And there is my thousands place. Now, in my ones place, or I'm sorry, in my tenths place rather, I have a 4. So I am going to draw 4 counters. In my hundredths place, I have a 2, so I'm going to draw 2 counters. And lastly, in my thousandths place, I have a 3, so I will draw 3 counters. When I read this equation, it tells me 2 times 423 thousandths. So I am making 2 copies of that number 423 thousandths. Currently in my place value chart, I only have 1 copy. So I need to go ahead and fill in those numbers again so that I now have 2 copies. So in my tenths place, I'm going to draw 4 more counters. Now I have 2 copies of 4 tenths. In my hundredths place, I'm going to draw in 2 more counters. So now I have 2 copies of 2 hundredths. And in my thousands place, I'm going to draw 3 more counters. So I now have 2 copies of 3 thousandths. And I'm going to total these up. I'm going to count what the total in each place value is. And in my thousandths place, I have 6 thousandths. In my hundredths place, I have 4 hundredths. And in my tenths place, I have 8 tenths. So the answer, or the product to this equation, is 846 thousandths. Make sure we have our decimal point there. Another approach that we can use instead of using a place value chart to multiply is to use an area model. And so I begin by putting my 7, my whole number, along the left side of my area model. Now, each of these boxes represents a place value, and so we're going to name what place value it is by writing our number in unit form. So beginning my ones place, I'm going to write 2 ones. My 4 is in my tenths place, I'm going to write 4 tenths, and my 1 is in my hundredths place, so I'm going to write 1 hundredths. And I'm going to shorthand this. So I'm going to run out of room if I write the entire word. So now I have 2 ones, 4 tenths, and 1/100th. And so I'm going to go through and I'm going to multiply each of these numbers by 7. And so 7 times 2 is 14. And so I have 14, and then I need to consider what place value that is. And that's where writing it in unit form helps us. And so I have 14 ones. And I know 7 times 4 is 28. And so I'm going to write 28. And my place value, or my unit here, is tenths. So I'm going to write tenths along with my 28. And 7 times 1 is 7. My unit is going to be hundredths. And so I'm going to write hundredths next to the 7. Now I know in standard form, 14 is just written as 1/4. And I know that 28 tenths in standard form can be written as 2 and 8 tenths. And lastly, I know in standard form that 7/100ths is written as 0.07. And you'll see that I put a plus sign between each of these numbers because now that I've multiplied them individually, I need to add them together. And so going back to our practice in adding decimals, I know that the most important thing I can do is line up my decimal points and to line up those place values as well. So I have 14. I'm going to put my 2 and 8 tenths and my 0.007. And wherever I have a blank spot, I'm going to fill that in with a 0 to hold that place value. And so if you see that my decimal points are lined up and that all of my digits are lined up as well, I know that I'm ready to begin adding. Now I'm going to begin with my lowest place value, and so when I come down here to my hundredths place, I see that I have 7 plus 0 plus 0, which remains 7. In my tenths place, I have 8 plus 0 plus 0, and so that remains 8. I bring down my decimal point. In my ones place, I have a 4 and a 2, so when I add 4 plus 2, that gives me 6. And in my tens place, I have 1 plus 0 plus 0, which again is just 1. And so when we multiply 7 times 2 and 41/100ths, the answer that we end up with is going to be 16 and 87/100ths. Again, this was Module 1, and we were working in Lesson 11, and we were practicing multiplying decimal fractions by single-digit whole numbers.